Raymond Clevie Carver, Jr. was an American short story writer and poet. Carver was a notable writer of the late 20th century and a contributor to the revitalization of the American short story and literature during the 1980s. Early life: Carver was born in Clatskanie, Oregon, a mill town on the Columbia River, and grew up in Yakima, Washington, the son of Elder Beatrice and Clevie Raymond Carver. His father, a skilled sawmill worker from Arkansas, was a fisherman and heavy drinker. Carver's mother worked on and off as a waitress and a retail clerk. His one brother, James Franklin Carver, was born in 1943. Carver was educated at local schools in Yakima, Washington. In his spare time, he read mostly novels by Mickey Spillane or publications such as Sports Afield and Outdoor Life, and hunted and fished with friends and family. After graduating from Yakima High School in 1956, Carver worked with his father at a sawmill in California. In June 1957, aged 19, he married 16-year-old Mary Ann Burke, who had just graduated from a private Episcopal school for girls. Their daughter, Christine Lorray, was born in December 1957. When their second child, a boy named Vance Lindsay, was born the next year, Carver was 20. He supported his family by working as a delivery man, janitor, library assistant, and sawmill laborer. During their marriage, Mary Ann also supported the family by working as an administrative assistant and a high school English teacher, salesperson, and waitress. Writing career: Carver became interested in writing in California, where he had moved with his family because his mother-in-law had a home in Paradise. Carver attended a creative writing course taught by the novelist John Gardner, who became a mentor and had a major influence on Carver's life and career. Carver's first published story, The Furious Seasons, appeared in 1961. More florid than his later work, the story strongly bore the influence of William Faulkner. Furious Seasons was later used as a title for a collection of stories published by Capra Press, and can now be found in the recent collections, No Heroics, Please and Call If You Need Me. Carver continued his studies first at Chico State University and then at Humboldt State College in Arcata, California, where he studied with Richard Cortez Day and received his B.A. in 1963. During this period he was first published and served as editor for Toyon, the university literary magazine, in which he published several of his own pieces under pseudonyms. He attended the Iowa Writers' Workshop during the 1963-1964 academic year. Homesick for California and unable to fully acclimate to the program's upper-middle-class milieu, he completed 12 credits out of the 30 required for a MA degree. Although Carver was awarded a fellowship for a second year of study from program director Paul Engel after Mary Ann Carver personally interceded and compared her husband's plight to Tennessee Williams' deleterious experience in the program 3 decades earlier, Carver nonetheless elected to leave the program at the end of the semester. Marian who postponed completing her education to support her husband's educational and literary endeavors, eventually graduated from San Jose State College in 1970 and taught English at Los Altos High School until 1977. In the mid-1960s, Carver and his family lived in Sacramento, California, where he briefly worked at a bookstore before taking a position as a night custodian at Mercy Hospital. He did all of the janitorial work in the first hour and then wrote at the hospital through the rest of the night. He sat in on classes at what was then Sacramento State College, including workshops with poet Dennis Schmitz. Carver and Schmitz soon became friends, and Carver's first book of poems, Near Klamath, was later written and published under Schmitz's guidance. With the appearance of Will You Please Be Quiet, Please? In Martha Foley's annual Best American Short Stories anthology and the impending publication of Near Klamath by the English Club of Sacramento State College, 1967 was a landmark year for Carver. He briefly enrolled in the library science graduate program at the University of Iowa that summer but returned to California following the death of his father. Shortly thereafter, the Carvers relocated to Palo Alto, California, so he could take his first white-collar job at Science Research Associates, where he worked intermittently as a textbook editor and public relations director through 1970. Following a 1968 sojourn to Israel, the Carvers relocated to San Jose, California. As Mary Ann finished her undergraduate degree, he would remain enrolled in the library science program at San Jose State through the end of 1969, failing once again to take a degree. Nevertheless, he established vital literary connections with Gordon Lish and the poet-publisher George Hitchcock during this period. After the publication of Neighbors in the June 1971 issue of Esquire at the instigation of Lish, Carver began to teach as a visiting artist at the University of California, Santa Cruz. He received a Stifner Fellowship to study in the non-degree graduate creative writing program at Stanford University during the 1972-1973 term, where he cultivated friendships with contemporaneous fellows Chuck Kinder, Max Crawford, and William Kittredge. The fellowship enabled the Carvers to buy a house in Cupertino, California. In addition to his position at Santa Cruz, he took on another teaching job at the University of California, Berkeley that year. His first short story collection, Will You Please Be Quiet, Please?, was published in 1976. The collection itself was shortlisted for the National Book Award, though it sold fewer than 5,000 copies that year. During his years of working different jobs, rearing children, and trying to write, Carver started to drink heavily. By his own admission, eventually he more or less gave up writing and took to full-time drinking. In the fall semester of 1973, Carver was a visiting lecturer in the Iowa Writers' Workshop with John Cheever, but Carver stated that they did less teaching than drinking and almost no writing. The next year, after leaving Iowa City, Cheever went to a treatment center to attempt to overcome his alcoholism, but Carver continued drinking for 3 years. After being hospitalized 3 times, Carver began his second life, and stopped drinking on June 2, 1977, with the help of Alcoholics Anonymous. Carver, who continued to smoke marijuana and experimented with cocaine at the behest of Jay McInerney during a 1980 visit to New York City, believed he would have died of alcoholism at the age of 40 if he hadn't found a way to stop drinking. Carver was nominated again in 1984 for his third major press collection, Cathedral, the volume generally perceived as his best. Included in the collection are the award-winning stories A Small, Good Thing, and Where I'm Calling From. John Updike selected the latter for inclusion in the Best American Short Stories of the Century. For his part, Carver saw Cathedral as a watershed in his career, in its shift towards a more optimistic and confidently poetic style. Personal Life and Death, Decline of First Marriage. The following excerpt from Scott Driscoll's review of Mary Ann Burke Carver's 2006 memoir describes the decline of Mary Ann and Raymond's marriage. The fall began with Ray's trip to Missoula, Montana, in '72 to fish with friend and literary helpmate Bill Kittredge. That summer Ray fell in love with Diane Cecily, an editor at the University of Montana, whom he met at Kittredge's birthday party. That's when the serious drinking began. It broke my heart and hurt the children. It changed everything. By fall of '74, writes Carver, he was more dead than alive. I had to drop out of the PhD program so I could get him cleaned up and drive him to his classes. Over the next several years, Mary Ann's husband physically abused her. Friends urged her to leave Raymond. But I couldn't. I really wanted to hang in there for the long haul. I thought I could outlast the drinking. I'd do anything it took. I loved Ray, first, last and always. Carver describes, without a trace of rancor, what finally put her over the edge. In the fall of '78, with a new teaching position at the University of Texas at El Paso, Ray started seeing Tess Gallagher, a writer from Port Angeles, who would become his muse and wife near the end of his life. It was like a contretemps. He tried to call me to talk about where we were. I missed the calls. He knew he was about to invite Tess to Thanksgiving. So he wrote a letter instead. I thought, I've gone through all those years fighting to keep it all balanced. Here it was, coming at me again, the same thing. I had to get on with my own life. But I never fell out of love with him. Second marriage. Carver met the poet Tess Gallagher at a writers' conference in Dallas, Texas, in November 1977. Beginning in January 1979, Carver and Gallagher lived together in El Paso, Texas, in a borrowed cabin near Port Angeles, Washington, and in Tucson, Arizona. In 1980, the two moved to Syracuse, New York, where Gallagher had been appointed the coordinator of the creative writing program at Syracuse University. Carver taught as a professor in the English department. He and Gallagher jointly purchased a house in Syracuse, at 832 Maryland Avenue. In ensuing years, the house became so popular that the couple had to hang a sign outside that read "Writers at Work" in order to be left alone. In 1982, Carver and first wife, Mary Ann, were divorced. He married Gallagher in 1988 in Reno, Nevada. 6 weeks later, on August 2, 1988, Carver died in Port Angeles, Washington, from lung cancer at the age of 50. In the same year, he was inducted into the American Academy of Arts and Letters. In December 2006, Gallagher published an essay in The Sun magazine, titled "Instead of Dying," about alcoholism and Carver's having maintained his sobriety. The essay is an adaptation of a talk she initially delivered at the Welsh Academy's Academy Intoxication Conference in 2006. The first lines read, "Instead of dying from alcohol, Raymond Carver chose to live. I would meet him 5 months after this choice, so I never knew the Ray who drank, except by report and through the characters and actions of his stories and poems." Death: Carver is buried at Ocean View Cemetery in Port Angeles. The inscription on his tombstone reads, "Late fragment, and did you get what you wanted from this life? Even so? I did. And what did you want? To call myself beloved, to feel myself beloved on the earth." His poem "Gravy" is also inscribed. As Carver's will directed, Tess Gallagher assumed the management of his literary estate. Memorials. In Carver's birth town of Clatskanie, Oregon, a memorial park and statue were constructed in the late 2000s, spearheaded by the local Friends of the Library, using mostly local donations. Tess Gallagher was present at the dedication. It is located in the Old Town on the corner of Lilac and Nehalem Streets, across from the library. A block away, the building where Raymond Carver was born still stands. There is a plaque of Carver in the foyer. Legacy and posthumous publications. The novelist Chuck Kinder published Honeymooners, a cautionary tale, a roman clef about his friendship with Carver in the 1970s. Carver's high school sweetheart and first wife, Mary Ann Burke Carver, wrote a memoir of her years with Carver, "What It Used to Be Like, A Portrait of My Marriage to Raymond Carver." The New York Times Book Review and San Francisco Chronicle named Carol Skleniker's unauthorized biography, Raymond Carver, A Writer's Life, published by Scribner, one of the best 10 books of that year. And the San Francisco Chronicle deemed it, exhaustively researched and definitive biography. Carver's widow, Tess Gallagher, refused to engage with Skleniker. His final collection of 7 stories, titled Elephant in Britain, was composed in the 5 years before his death. The nature of these stories, especially Errand, have led to some speculation that Carver was preparing to write a novel. Only one piece of this work has survived, the fragment The Augustine Notebooks, first printed in No Heroics, Please. Tess Gallagher published 5 Carver stories posthumously in Call If You Need Me. One of the stories won an O. Henry Award in 1999. In his lifetime, Carver won 5 O. Henry Awards. These winning stories were Are These Actual Miles, Put Yourself in My Shoes, Are You a Doctor? A Small, Good Thing, and Errand. Tess Gallagher fought with Not for permission to republish the stories in What We Talk About When We Talk About Love, as they were originally written by Carver, as opposed to the heavily edited and altered versions that appeared in 1981 under the editorship of Gordon Lish. The book, entitled Beginners, was released in hardback on October 1, 2009 in Great Britain, followed by its U.S. publication in the Library of America edition that collected all of Carver's short fiction in a single volume. The title story from Nathan Englander's 2012 short story collection, What We Talk About When We Talk About Anne Frank, takes influence from Carver's What We Talk About When We Talk About Love. Literary characteristics: Carver's career was dedicated to short stories and poetry. He described himself as inclined toward brevity and intensity, and hooked on writing short stories. Another stated reason for his brevity was that the story, or poem, can be written and read in one sitting. This was not simply a preference but, particularly at the beginning of his career, a practical consideration as he juggled writing with work. His subject matter was often focused on blue-collar experience, and was clearly reflective of his own life. Characteristics of minimalism are generally seen as one of the hallmarks of Carver's work, although, as reviewer David Wiegand notes, Carver never thought of himself as a minimalist or in any category, for that matter. He rejected categories generally, Sklenaker says. I don't think he had an abstract mind at all. He just wasn't built that way, which is why he's so good at picking the right details that will stand for many things. Carver's editor at Esquire, Gordon Lish, was instrumental in shaping Carver's prose in this direction, where his earlier tutor John Gardner had advised Carver to use 15 words instead of 25, Lish instructed Carver to use 5 in place of 15. Objecting to the surgical amputation and transplantation of Lish's heavy editing, Carver eventually broke with him. During this time, Carver also submitted poetry to James Dickey, then poetry editor of Esquire. Carver's style has also been described as dirty realism, which connected him with a group of writers in the 1970s and 1980s that included Richard Ford and Tobias Wolff, as well as others such as Ann Beattie, Frederick Bartem, and Jane Ann Phillips. With the exception of Beattie, who wrote about upper-middle-class people, these were writers who focused on sadness and loss in the everyday lives of ordinary often lower-middle-class or isolated and marginalized people. Works. Fiction, collections, Will You Please Be Quiet, Please? Furious Seasons, What We Talk About When We Talk About Love, Cathedral, Elephant, compilations, Where I'm Calling From, Short Cuts, Selected Stories, published to accompany Robert Altman film Short Cuts, Collected Stories, complete short fiction including beginners, poetry, collections, Near Klamath, Winter Insomnia, At Night the Salmon Move, Fires, Where Water Comes Together with Other Water, Ultramarine, A New Path to the Waterfall, Gravy, compilations, In a Marine Light, Selected Poems, All of Us, The Collected Poems, Screenplays, Dostoevsky, Films and Theatre Adaptations, Short Cuts directed by Robert Altman, based on 9 Carver short stories and a poem, Everything Goes. Directed by Andrew Kotatko, starring Hugo Weaving and Abby Cornish, based on Carver's short story, Why Don't You Dance? Jindabyne directed by Ray Lawrence, based on Carver's short story So Much Water So Close to Home, Everything Must Go directed by Dan Rush, and starring Will Ferrell, based on Carver's short story, Why Don't You Dance? Carver, a production directed by William Gaskell at London's Alcola Theatre in 1995, adapted from 5 Carver short stories including, What's in Alaska? Put Yourself in My Shoes, and Intimacy, Student Over Angstrom 3/4 Ina directed by Raymond Carver, based on The Student's Wife, Carousel directed by Thomas Zadia, inspired by Ashtray, Men Who Don't Work directed by Alexander Atkins and Andrew Franks, inspired by What Do You Do in San Francisco? Birdman or directed by Alejandro González Iñárritu. The film's plot centers around a stage adaptation of What We Talk About When We Talk About Love. Musical adaptations: Everything's Turning to White is a folk rock track written and performed by Paul Kelly on the album So Much Water So Close to Home, which was based on Carver's short story of the same name. References. Further reading: Carver, Mary Ann Burke. What It Used to Be Like, A Portrait of My Marriage to Raymond Carver, St. Martin's Press. ISBN A0-312-33258-0. Yardley, Jonathan. Raymond Carver's first wife remembers the influential American writer. The Washington Post A Review. Halpert, Sam. Raymond Carver, An Oral Biography. University of Iowa Press. ISBN A0-87745-502-3. Klepp. Sandra Lee and Mildner, Robert. New Paths to Raymond Carver. Critical Essays on His Life, Fiction, and Poetry. University of South Carolina Press. ISBN A978-1-57003-724-5. McGrath, Charles. I, Editor-Author. The New York Times. Week in Review. Retrieved October 28, 2007. My Chaka, Star Copyright Fane. Scissors, a Novel. Doubleday. ISBN A978-0-3855-3749-0. Nesset, Kirk. Stories of Raymond Carver, A Critical Study. Ohio University Press. ISBN A0-8214-1100-4. Peters, Giza S. El Silencio de lo Real, Sentido, Comprensia Cubed Northeast Interpretatia Cubed en la Narrativa de Raymond Carver. Monteavila Editors Latinoamericana. ISBN A978-980-01-1219-9. Runyon, Randolph Paul. Reading Raymond Carver. Syracuse University Press. ISBN A978-0-8156-2631-2. Sklenicka, Carol. Raymond Carver, A Writer's Life. Scribner. ISBN A978-0-7432-6245-3. Steele, William L. and Carol, Maureen P. Remembering Ray, A Composite Biography of Raymond Carver. Capra Press. ISBN A0-88496-370-5. Steele, William L. and Gentry, Marshall Bruce. Conversations with Raymond Carver. University Press of Mississippi. ISBN A0-87805-449-9. External links. Gies, Martha. Raymond Carver. The Oregon Encyclopedia. Gura, David. Writes Battle Brews over unedited Carver stories. All Things Considered. Hansen, Ron. Ron Hansen reviews the biography and short stories of Raymond Carver. The Washington Post. A review of Raymond Carver, A Writer's Life by Carol Sklenicka, and of Raymond Carver collected stories edited by William L. Steele and Maureen P. Carroll. Haslam, David. An in-depth interview where Carver talks about his father, his early writing, his characters, and the dark humor in some of his stories. Hurd, Laura. Review of the posthumously published Tell It All. Tell It All provides numerous links to Carver sites on the web and links to his work. Ho, Oliver. Manga and Minimalism, The Shared Visions of Yoshiro Tozumi and Raymond Carver. Pop Matters. International Raymond Carver Society. Homepage. ISCS website. International Raymond Carver Society. Welcome, The Raymond Carver Review. Kent State University. King, Stephen. Raymond Carver's Life and Stories. The New York Times. A review of Raymond Carver, A Writer's Life by Carol Sklenicka and Raymond Carver collected stories edited by William L. Steele and Maureen P. Carroll. Cain, David. Echoes of Our Own Lives, An Interview with Raymond Carver. Myers, D.G. Between Stories, A Memoir of Raymond Carver. Philosophy and Literature. Pilsgrove, Carol. A Conversation on Raymond Carver. Historian Carol Pilsgrove interviews Carver biographer Carol Sklenicka. Simpson, Mona Simpson and Watsby, Lewis. Raymond Carver, The Art of Fiction No. 76. Paris Reviewer, Smith, Del. Del Smith's experiences adapting Carver's story, Why Don't You Dance, into a student film in mid-80s. Beyond the Margins. Wood, Gabby. Raymond Carver, The Kindest Cut. The Observer.